Payton Pardee, joining us now on the Buyers Barricades at guest line. Coach, boy, last week it was all joyous coming off that win, and then I get to the game on Sunday, and I was having a lot of fun, and then kickoff happened.
I think that's a very fair description. Life and football, they can kind of throw you some curveballs. Obviously, that certainly wasn't the outcome that we wanted or were preparing for. But all we can do right now is just focus on fixing the mistakes and getting better going into our game this week against Birmingham.
Peyton, when you look at this game, it just seemed like it kind of got out of your hands early, and it just it was hard for you to get it back under control. Is that kind of the way this one happened?
I think anytime you start off a game, slow offensively like we did, you kind of, lose some of your, some of the flow of the game, if that makes sense. And so I think for us, we had multiple opportunities to get ourselves back in the game. And really it just comes down to we need to be more efficient, not only on offense, but on all three phases. And so that's going to be something that we will correct going into this week.
Payton Pardee joining us here on the Blitz. First play of the game offensively, Kellen gets sacked. And I don't want to sound like I'm picking on Kellen, but from a coach's standpoint, educate us all, because I'm sitting in the stands and I'm watching, and I can't tell. Offensive line, they look like they were getting dominated. Kellen didn't have a lot of time, but it also didn't feel like he was feeling the rush. He wasn't trying to scramble. Is it him and quick on decision making, or is it kind of a combination of all of that?
I think especially, not just only focusing on that first play, but really, overall offensively, anytime we were hurried or hit or, things of that nature, I think it's truly, and this is not a coach speak answer, it was truly a collective effort. As far as a collective effort of different guys at different points in time, not, in essence, not really following the scheme or not doing what we were supposed to do. And, part of that, once again, always falls back on me as the head coach and offensive coordinator is, I need to do a better job of putting our guys in a good position. But, me personally, I wouldn't put that all on our quarterback. There was a wide variety of things that externally around him weren't going right, if that makes sense. And I know that's not great English, but that's something that we are absolutely addressing this week.
Well, I tell you what, Coach, you have a few things to address this week, and I would assume that's been taking place in practice before, unfortunately, you guys head back out on the road. I tell you what, the schedule makers have not done you guys any favors, and I feel bad for you in that respect, back out on the road. So, I mean, when a game goes like that, and I don't know what's worse sometimes, Coach, losing something at the end of a game with a field goal or getting beat the way you guys got beat on Sunday. But where do you start? What's the first step when you get back out to practice? What do you tell the team, and how do you get started preparing for the next week?
My big messaging has been, and it'll continue to be, when you look at that game, our game against the Roughnecks on Sunday, truly at its core, we had multiple opportunities throughout the course of the game to have that outcome end up a lot differently. And so for us, it really comes down to, we need to identify what the mistakes were, why they happened, and then take, targeted specific steps to improve and correct those errors so they don't show up again. And so, one thing I'm a big believer in is, you can't change the past and we can't look to the future. The only thing that we can handle and address in the immediate is our preparation and our work this week, obviously taking the necessary steps to improve any and all mistakes that we had last week. And so that's been our big focus is you can't dwell on the past. That game, obviously that was very disappointing. That was certainly not the outcome that we wanted, but all we're able to do at this point in time is we have to learn from the mistakes, make sure that we don't make them again. And figure out, what we need to improve on and do to be able to beat the Birmingham Stallions.
Payton Pardee joining us here on the Blitz. As you look at what those steps are, you had to bench Kellen at some point in the game. Who is going to be QB1 when you line up Sunday in Birmingham?
That's something that we're going to evaluate, over the course of this week. I've said this before, and I will say it again. So I'd be remiss if I didn't. I believe in all three quarterbacks that we have. I think they're all very, very talented. They all have unique skill sets, and so I feel confident with the players that we have in that room. But to answer your question, that's going to be something that we're going to evaluate, this week in practice.
Payton, and I love the way you do that and you take up for your players. You do it beautifully. But at some point in time, they've got to take a little responsibility too. What has been their attitude in practice? I mean, because losing a game like that after coming off a big win, sometimes maybe you can get down. How have they responded this week?
Obviously, we literally just got off the field from our first practice of this week. And I'll be 100% honest with you. I'm very, very pleased with what we did today. And I think our players, in my opinion, we're far too talented to play the way that we did against the Roughnecks. And I think our players, they understand that and they acknowledge that. And one thing that has been really, really neat for me is, as the head coach here, has been able to see how the players, are taking some ownership, player-led, so to speak, of this program, which is something that, has always been the case, with the San Antonio Brahmas dating back to 2024 when Coach Wade took over. And so where we are right now, I'm very optimistic. I certainly believe that we have everything we need in this team to win games and to be successful. And today's practice was a really, really good step in the right direction. A lot of the things that, we need to get cleaned up and fixed, we made great strides in several of those areas today.
And that's always the goal in this league, especially. I mean, it's winning games and winning championships, but for players, how do they bounce back from adversity? I'm just curious. It's your first game in the Alamo Dome as the head coach. Wade Phillips was there, which I thought was cool, presented you with the game ball before everything got underway. A lot of talk coming in about it being Kellen Mond's first game back in the Alamo Dome since his high school days. Is it difficult at all processing all that, or is even in your mind when you see him play as poorly as he did, where you got to bench him in his hometown in that first game? Did that factor or even cross your mind as you were making the decision to change quarterbacks?
Absolutely. For me, I myself and our coaching staff, every decision that we make, we always think and start with, what's best for this team, what's best for this program, because I truly believe, that nobody on this team is bigger than this program, if that makes sense. And so, obviously that was a difficult decision, and ultimately one that I made. But of course, the circumstances surrounding it definitely add a certain, layer of difficulty with that. But at the time that's the decision that we wanted to make as a coaching staff, and that I felt was the right direction for the rest of that game.
All right, Payton, you are back out on the road, and you've got a Birmingham team that is pretty good. What kind of problems are they going to pose for you? What challenge do you face this week?
I think looking at the offensive side first, obviously they have a very dynamic run game. Obviously we'll see what happens with Matt Corral, their quarterback. I know he was inactive last week. He is a true, dual threat quarterback. He's really, really good through the pass, but as well as, running with his own legs. So that's going to present challenges, things that we'll have to be prepared for. And then defensively, they are, truly one of the more well-coached defenses in the league, in my opinion. They are very, very technically sound. They have an excellent front four pass rush, and they have good players. And so for us, it's going to come down to this week. We need to be detailed in our game plan and our process and plan to attack them on offense and stop them on defense. And so this is a great challenge for us, and it's one that we're really looking forward to. I know our players are fired up at this opportunity. We've never competed against Birmingham at Birmingham, so that'll be another fun layer for us, and it's an opportunity we're really excited about.
Payton Pardee, interim head coach of the San Antonio Brahmas, joining us here on the Blitz. And I know, Coach, we spent a lot of time talking about the offense because that's Offense, man. We all love offense. We like seeing points scored and talking quarterbacks and all that. And you're also the offensive coordinator and play caller. But put the head coach hat on. Your level of concern with the defense, man. They gave up a ton of yards against Houston. Third down conversions. Houston, it felt like I didn't see time of possession numbers, but they felt like they dominated time of possession. In going against this Birmingham team, how concerned are you on the defensive side and fixing some of the issues there?
I like you said, we definitely have some things that we need to clean up defensively. But as far as my concern level, I have all the faith and confidence in our defensive players as far as personnel and our coaching staff. And that kind of goes back to, obviously on offense, defense, and special teams, we did not play well enough to win, by no means or, by no stretch. And so, to that end, things that we've emphasized and will continue to emphasize this week and moving forward, that I think contributed to the performance we had is, I've said before and then said to the team, football, as elementary as it might sound, comes down to blocking, tackling, and catching in essence. And the opposite of catching, of course, is, defensive backs being able to, break up passes and things of that nature. And so, to that end, we have some things that we have to clean up on both of those ends. But, I have the total confidence and faith in our defensive staff to get some of those things corrected. And, it's really difficult when you lose a game in the fashion that we did as far as the point margin. But I guess to me, where my mind is, from a head coach's perspective, is we're really, really close. And there's a lot of mistakes that are, I don't want to say easily correctable, but certainly can be corrected in an efficient manner this week. And so that's what we're starting with is, identifying what the issues are and then developing a plan. What we did as a staff yesterday is developing a plan. How are we going to correct these mistakes? Because it's one thing to point them out, but you have to have a plan, plan of action as to how you're going to correct them. And that is what we are currently doing right now.
Well, I love that, and it sounds good, and we'll look forward to this week. But the real strategy I've got to ask you about, Payton, superstitions. You're changing your socks, your underwear, a different pair of pants, maybe a different shirt. What are you going to do different this week?
I'm a big believer. I did the same thing in DC as I did this past week. I'm not a superstitious kind of guy. I'm a big preparation and work guy. So, I might change up my socks. I don't know, but I'm going to keep the rest of it the same.
Hey, change your doors too, man. Come on, do us all a favor. Everybody around you, at least wash them. Coach,
of course.
Hey, Coach, you left the door open. At what point in the week do you think you will name a starting quarterback for Sunday? Or are you going to pull that coaching trick and say you'll find out when we take that first offensive snap in Birmingham?
I think, I truly think we are going to take the week to evaluate it. And, you guys might not like me for this, but I am going to hold my cards a little bit close to the vest. I think we want to make sure, we truly evaluate it this week. And so we're going to kind of see how this week goes. And then, once we feel ready to make a public announcement, we'll make that announcement.
Good deal. Coach, good luck this week. I know next week when we talk, we'll get ready for another home game because those things actually do exist for you guys.
I tell you what, and, I do want to say this, and I apologize for holding you guys up, but, I really want to thank the city of San Antonio from the bottom of my heart. The fan turnout and attendance at our game was spectacular. And I'm really thankful and very appreciative of the city, showing up in the middle of Fiesta and coming to our game. And we're really looking forward to being back home in 2 weeks. And I just want to encourage the fan base. We're excited to correct what we need to, and we're excited to get back home and put on a better show, for the city of San Antonio. But I do want to thank, everybody that was at the game and everybody that was supporting us, because that was something very, very special and something I'm very grateful for.
Well, and you think about, this weekend in Birmingham, because you guys apparently love the road, but next Friday night, May 9th, DC Defenders in at the Alamo Dome. And that's going to be a fun one because I'm sure, those Brahma types, they're going to come up with their own little snake deal that they do up there with the beer cups there, the beer snake. we can do better in San Antonio, I promise. Plus, we have more fans showing up at the games.
Absolutely. That's why, I was proud because, last week I said it to you guys, we, in my opinion, and I am biased, we truly have the best fan base in the league. And I love our fans. I love the city. And we're really looking forward to getting back. Obviously our focus and attention's on the Birmingham Stallions, but we're really looking forward to getting back home in 2 weeks.
Absolutely.
Nice,
Coach,
nice.
get some sleep this week. I know you got some corrections to get done, but enjoy the ride, get some sleep, and go kick some ass on Sunday.
Will do. Thank you, guys. Appreciate you.
Payton Pardee, interim head coach of the San Antonio Brahmas, on the Buyers Barricades guest line, where they provide traffic control, rental, and sales for San Antonio and beyond.